The software industry has a severe lack of women. There are numerous root causes of this diversity problem. Families do not encourage women to enter math and science. The media portrays most programmers as white males. Our industry often picks up on the signals of the broader society and perpetuates them. Reversing this trend of low female involvement in computer science and STEM education could have tremendous positive impact on our society as a whole. And Jenine Beekhuyzen joins the show today to discuss how she is taking action to improve the pipeline of young women entering computer science. If you enjoy the episode today, please share it on Twitter or Facebook, or tell your friends about your favorite episode of Software Engineering Daily. You can also send me an email at softwareengineeringdaily@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new show ideas. Thank you for listening, and after a quick message from our sponsor today, we will get on to today's episode. I had a crazy idea a couple weeks ago. It's a photo sharing app that only has pictures of cats. When I finish my photo sharing cat application, I will be deploying it to Linode, because Linode is the fastest hosted Linux provider. I don't want to get locked into a proprietary platform that's going to overcharge me as soon as my app gets popular. I just want a fast Linux server with simple pricing. Go to linode.com/sedaily and get $20 in free credit today. Plans start at $10 a month, so my free $20 will be plenty to launch my cat photo sharing app. Once I need to scale, I can use tools like node balancers and backups, and Linode has built-in dashboarding and metrics so that I can see the traffic to my Linode servers, and I can understand how many of my users are posting cat pictures and looking at each other's cat pictures. Go to linode.com/sedaily and get $20 in free credit today. The plans start at $10 a month, so it's a great deal. Thanks to Linode for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily. Now let's get on to this episode. Jenine Beekhuyzen is the director of Adroit Research and is the founder of the Tech Girls Movement. Jenine, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Hi, Jeff. Happy to be here.
The software industry has a severe lack of women, and the focus of this episode is to understand why that is and how it is changing. So I want to start off by asking you, what is the current state of women in technology, and where are we going?
Great question. The current state of women in tech is we actually need more women in tech. So we've been in this place for quite a while, and the conversation is gaining momentum, which is great, but we need to see more action in actually putting processes and systems in place to get more diversity in our tech workforce. And it's really not just about women, it's about diversity in general, and essentially having the people who are building our technology every day actually being part of those development teams. So we need some action, and there is lots of efforts in this area, but we need to coordinate a little better and move things along much quicker, I think.
Is the problem that women are entering technology fields and then leaving, or is it about the fact that they just never enter technology in the first place?
Excellent question. I think it's a bit of both. So certainly the women who do come into the tech industry, many are finding it's not a very welcoming environment, mostly because they are in the minority and the environment's not set up for them. So it's not really too surprising. But certainly there is a big pipeline problem in that we're not getting young people to come into technology careers. And so we have these gaps in the pipeline, as we call it. And so we have these leaks. And so we are losing young women, so we lose them around year 4 at school, so around 9 or 10 years old. They get turned off by stereotypes in the media, by the curriculum, and by a number of different things. So the research says we lose them there. But if we do manage to keep them, then we attract them into an industry that's actually not a great place to be right now. So we need to change on a number of different levels.
So let's start from the bottom of the pipeline. We have this idea that girls are not interested in math and science, and that's why they get these stereotyping signals from the media and from their family, from society, that they should not go into math and science, that it is something to be discouraged from, and they get this very early on. Why do we have this idea that girls are not interested in math and science?
It's funny that you asked that question, because actually just by saying that question, girls are not interested in science and math, we're perpetuating that view that they're not. And I think the more we say that, the more girls are disinterested. So this is quite a recent phenomenon, to be honest. It really started around the 1980s.
To be clear, I asked the question, why do we have the idea? I don't actually believe that girls are not interested in math and science.
Good. Absolutely. I like that response. So, and I want to have a bit of fun with this as well, because I think we need to sort of work together and think outside the box a little bit here. So, I mean, if you think about it, the first programmer in the world was a woman. So we have Ada Lovelace back in the 1840s. And so we're talking 170 years ago. And then women have participated in quite a number of significant areas. We have Hedy Lamarr, who created spread spectrum, the basis for Wi-Fi that we use every day. We've got Grace Hopper, who in the Navy in the 1950s invented the compiler and literally changed the way we talk to computers. So women have had a very strong role in creating our technology history, even though we don't hear very much of them. But certainly there's a discussion around the 1980s. The PC was introduced. It was marketed as the boys' toy, and it was always generally put in the boys' room to play with. It was not really encouraged for young women to participate as part of that. And I think, to be honest, it goes back even earlier. I know when I grew up, I was given dolls to play with, and boys were given things to build. And so if you build spatial skills, where you don't build those kinds of skills playing with dolls necessarily. So I think it's right from very, very early ages we start to ingrain this unconscious bias.
So certainly we have this. We have this in our society. We have this psychosis that is perpetuated by the way that we present math and science to women, and the way that we perceive, the way that we display women in the media as not being interested in math and science. But I'm really curious, like, is there some strange historical circumstance that led to this weird subjugation? Like, I don't know how far you've looked back in history. Like, have you come to any conclusions about why this dynamic between men and women has perpetuated this way?
I think going as far back as we can, there was a lot of equality in this area where women had the opportunity. And I think a lot of it is really just about opportunity and being given access to these kinds of tools to actually play with. And play is such an important part of this. And so again, I mean, think about your own household growing up, and where was the technology and who was responsible for it. And I guess now that we live in this technological age, it's ever more present and much more than it had been in the past. So, but if you think back to even, say, World War II, women were the code breakers. They developed the very first computers, the ENIAC and so on, and the Colossus, and they were actually fundamentally part of making computers and technology the way we have it today. So I think really there's been this shift in society more than anything, that we really do say that these are the feminine jobs and these are the masculine jobs. I mean, think about teaching and nursing, for instance. They're very feminine type jobs, and only because we've created that as a society, we say that that's the way that it should be. So I think it's very much socially constructed, meaning we have constructed this view of the world which isn't necessarily flattering. It's not actually flattering for men in a lot of ways either, I have to say. I have a lot of male students come to me, university students, and say, well, actually, this isn't a good image for us. Everyone thinks we're the sort of the strange, unusual ones as well, and it's not, we're not respected really for what we do in a lot of instances. It's only when you get the high profile, we've made $1 million, we've got this great product, that it actually starts to say, oh, okay, we think they're kind of cool. But actually on the ground level, it's not seen to be a very cool thing for guys either.
So we've talked about the historical aspects and the bottom of the pipeline. Now I'm curious about, you mentioned that even if a woman makes it through the thicket of negative signaling, the tech industry itself can be a very oppressive place. It can be an oppressive place for basically anybody who does not fit the mold of a white male, frankly. Unless you're in, at least that's the case in America.
Absolutely.
What are the problems that manifest because of that diversity problem, because of that the imbalance in diversity?
Yeah, really great question. And
how does it create an oppressive environment?
I think that happens on a number of levels, both structurally and individually. So I think on a structural level, it's quite difficult for minorities, particularly women, to actually move their way up through the management levels, because it's taking time out of work for family reasons, because women are, even though men are taking these roles on more, women are still the primary providers in the household, like as a caregivers. So I guess that's not valued very much in many instances. So those work environments essentially are set up for white men, essentially. So they're not set up to take time out for family challenges and all of those kinds of things that we need to be doing as part of everyday life. So I think women are automatically disadvantaged because they're taking the time out of the workforce. And I guess if you think about the pay gap, so if women are getting paid at least 20% less than men in most instances, so if the choice comes where a couple has a child, who's going to go back to work? Well, it's always the male that'll go back to work because he's always going to earn more. So again, the default becomes the woman doesn't have that opportunity. So I think the structures that we actually have in place on a societal level and an organizational level and even policy level has long-term ramifications for the decisions that we actually make. And then on the individual level, well, women aren't so good at negotiating. That's quite well known. So women will often come into a new role and not negotiate for their salary, whereas a male will more often negotiate their salary. So the male will start higher in that wage. And so they're always going to be that little bit higher, so the woman will never actually catch up. So I think, again, no matter how well we tell women to negotiate, some of these structures may still actually challenge us as well.
And with the negotiation part, I find that a particularly difficult problem because ideally, you would just say, oh, you're a woman, you should negotiate more. But we obviously have these, other societal oppressions around and societal expectations around how a woman should act. And this is like, you're not supposed to negotiate. This is why, the type of things that Sheryl Sandberg talks about in Lean In, where, you have the same type of person. And if there's a male name associated with how this person talks, then the person is described as confident. And then if there's a female name associated with how this person talks, they're described as brusque or, whatever like subtly negative term they use to describe a woman who is assertive and is trying to carry her point forward with some level of confidence. And so it's like it creates this horrible double bind where you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And what I really think is important to highlight in this discussion is that this is not an issue that just impacts the women. This is a societal problem because there is a utilitarian benefit if more diversity is created in technology. If we get more women involved in tech, we need more of every basically every subset of people that is not a white male in tech, because we need a wider variety of ideas. So I don't know, maybe you can bring that point home further. Explain the advantages that we will experience as a society if we get a more encouraging environment for women to join the technology workforce.
I love everything that you just said, and you're completely spot on with absolutely all of that. And I think the word bossy is the one that comes out with women in those right. leadership positions. Yes, and you're absolutely right. So it's not just what's happening within the tech industry; it's those wider societal views of the place that women have in society and other kinds of minorities as well. So I think you're absolutely right there. So I think there's absolute value in having an opportunity for everyone to participate. Like you say, I mean, if you have everyone who looks the same, they're all going to think the same, and then we don't get any kind of innovation or creativity from that. So there's evidence, for instance, that by having a female on a team that's putting together that applies for a patent, there's something like 25% more likely to actually get the patent if there's a female on the team, simply because they've actually thought of other ideas outside of the box. And you have something like 40% more likely to get your patent cited by having a female on the team. I mean, that's just one very specific example. If we talk organizationally, organization boards for companies perform better if they have diversity. They have companies have better financial performance, better company reputation, and there's endless sort of documented benefits for companies to have a diverse workforce. And I think in society in general, I mean, everyone deserves the opportunity to participate. And so, I mean, I have young girls, particularly sort of 7, 8 years old, asking if they can participate. And why would they ask? I mean, for a male, that just simply probably wouldn't happen. They would just jump in and start doing it. So for me, it's about making it normalized from the very young age to say it's okay for everyone to participate in tech and build tech. And actually, I think a lot of it comes down to confidence. And I don't know if you're aware of some of the research around stereotype threats. So for instance, in the classroom, if we get, for instance, a young female to write her gender on a maths test or a science test before she sits the test, she will actually perform worse on that test than she could have, just because society kind of says that that's how you're supposed to perform. And so the simple act of actually putting an F on your paper could result in you doing worse. And this is very, very well documented for the last sort of 25 years. And it's been done with, for instance, African American children and different minority groups.
Point to the bad doll.
That's it. And we're sort of putting this out there already and not giving them the opportunity. So it's not a level playing field.
Yeah, so just for listeners who don't know, that the study that I'm referring to is this study where they take these young African American kids and then young white kids, and they're like, I don't know, 3 or 5 years old or something, and they hand them a African American doll and a white doll, and they say point to the bad doll, and both groups point to the African American doll. It's just this horribly tragic idea of how early this signaling gets internalized, and that's one reason why I find these types of issues so important to touch on, because they are so ingrained into our culture that it is so threatening to how we operate as a society. So I want to talk about
completely.
I want to talk about what you are doing, because obviously this is something that drives you to activism. And one thing you've created is the Tech Girls movement, and this is a movement to encourage more women to go into technology. What is the mission of the Tech Girls movement?
Yes, thank you. So the Tech Girls movement really is about empowering the next generation of female technology leaders. And we are starting very young. And at the moment, I don't feel that we actually have a workforce that's capable of building the technology of the future. So by 2018, they're saying we won't have a quarter of the technology workforce that we actually need in general. So we certainly actually need more males to participate as well, but we need people more generally. And they're also saying in 5 years' time, 75% of jobs will require some kind of STEM skills. So anyone that's not participating in this is actually going to be left behind. So for me, I've been researching in this area for, say, the last 15 years, looking at women in industry and what are the barriers and challenges, looking at university students and why do they come and study technology, and then going back to schools and trying to understand, what are the motivators and what are the barriers at that age. And certainly the Tech Girls movement is designed to target girls as young as possible. We originally started at, say, 8 to 17, but I have girls as young as 5 ordering books from the website. So we have a book called Tech Girls Are Superheroes, which is a free book we give out to schoolgirls across Australia at the moment. And the idea is showcasing women in STEM as superhero characters. So all of the women featured are women that I know who've inspired me personally from all around the world. And they do amazing things with science and tech every single day. So it's about showcasing those women as role models. They're accessible women. And we have people like Sheryl Sandberg who do a great job, but she's not very accessible. So having local women who are available to actually mentor these girls and talk to them. And the idea of superpower is not that we're good at everything, but it's about pulling out that one good thing that we're good at when we need to. And we all have one thing that makes us different from everybody else. And I've found found that that really appeals to young girls, particularly because it's all about confidence. And even for women in the industry, it really ends up coming down to confidence. And if you get your confidence beat out of you enough times, you end up leaving. And there's only so many situations you can probably put up with that in. So trying to give girls resilience and confidence from a very young age around using technology and building technology, so that hopefully they get past that sort of year, to that 8 or 9 year old age point where the stereotypes kick in and the boys push the girls out of the way in the classroom and those kinds of things, so that it sustains them over that length of time. So again, trying from a very young age to create a pipeline and giving girls an option to opt in rather than just automatically opting out.
And what I love about this book, the Tech Girls Are Superheroes book, is that this idea of technology being this mode of empowerment is so important. And if you compare this idea to, for example, like Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, you have kids who have magic wands, and these magic wands empower them to do certain things. But if you contrast the idea of the magic wand with the smartphone or the laptop, you can certainly make things of the same magnitude of power with a laptop or a smartphone that you see these characters making with a magic wand in Harry Potter. So I think that it's a really good way of accessing the confidence meter of these girls who get access to this book. So tell me more about how you personally got the idea for the Tech Girls movement.
Sure. And thank you for that. I've never had the analogy with Harry Potter before, and I actually really like that. And I think not so much the wand, even having a computer or a phone is actually even more tangible, so more real for young people. So it actually makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And
personally, I would rather have a laptop than a stick of wood.
Absolutely. It's so much more helpful. Yes. So how did I get involved? So I guess myself being one of a few girls in my own information technology degree at university, and there was sort of a handful of us and in a room full of 200 or 300 students. And so we actually got together and beat the boys instead as our bit of way of getting through. But I guess I felt that was a very lonely experience, and the type of work that you can do in technology, there's so many opportunities. And I work from home much of the time. I travel quite a bit. I earn pretty good money. I get to be challenged every day in what I do. And for me, it's the most perfect way to spend my work time. And so I started teaching at university, so teaching the course that I actually completed myself. And I found in the first year we were getting very few females coming through, so less than 5% in my class every semester. But what I found was the girls that did come through the course they did really, really well. They almost sort of topped the class. So it was a matter of saying, well, we're not getting them there. And of course, university isn't the only option. There are other ways to engage in tech. So going back to schools and actually giving girls choices. And I guess I sort of look back and think, what information would I like to give to my 5-year-old self? And I didn't feel I had a lot of choices growing up. And I think technology is one of those democratized industries where everyone can kind of have a go. And there's nothing really stopping you. Everyone has a computer now, access to technology and the internet, and really we don't really need much else. So trying to get girls' attention from a very young age and saying, this is an awesome lifestyle, come and join us. Like, this is a great place to be. And you can literally create your own future. You can create the space where you want to work. So I decide who I work with, when I work, on what projects I want to work. And that's a really awesome place to be. And I want young girls, even if they don't want to come to university, that's absolutely fine, but know that they have choices. So the program that I run alongside the book is called The Search for the Next Tech Girl Superhero, which essentially is a youth entrepreneurship program. So we partner with Technovation in the US, actually, and they run a global program, so the Technovation Challenge, and we're the regional ambassadors here in Australia. So we use their 12-week curriculum, which teaches girls practical hands-on skills, how to build an app. So they have to find a problem in their local community that they want to solve. They have to do some research, how other people have tried to solve that problem. Then they have to design their own solution and actually build a prototype in App Inventor. And by the end of the 12 weeks, they pitch their idea. So they have to do a pitch video and post it on YouTube, a little business plan and a few other things. But again, they have something really tangible at the end of that they can come away with and feel like they've really achieved something. We have prizes and a big showcase event, and we do maker spaces and a bunch of great things. And for them to say, wow, I was part of this and I did a pretty good job. I think that's pretty cool.
Software engineers are always looking to automate their work. Software automation lets us get more done with the same number of resources. Investment automation works the same way. Wealthfront is an automated investment service that relies solely on software to acquire and manage client accounts. Traditional investment services have many humans in the loop, advising clients and taking fees. The problem with these older advisory services is that the advice that these services are applying is often so systematic that a computer could give the same answer, or an even better answer. Wealthfront takes a new approach with software-driven automated investment that provides better returns through software engineering. Go to wealthfront.com/SE daily to get a special offer for our listeners. $15,000 managed for free when you open your account. Don't pay commissions and account fees. Maximize your gains with Wealthfront's set it and forget it investment automation. Check out wealthfront.com/SE daily. It would support Software Engineering Daily, and it would also introduce you to the world of automated investment, so you can see if you like it or not. Wealthfront.com/SE daily. Thanks to Wealthfront for sponsoring the show. You've been a loyal sponsor, and we really appreciate it. Now let's get on with the show. So I want to talk more about the specific tactics that you take in order to run this organization. I think there are probably people listening who are part of an organization, an organization with a social mission involved in technology. I know we've had a number of them on the show. When you said that there were these extremely low turnouts, it reminded me of an interview we did with Sarah Allen a while ago. She runs something called Railsbridge and Bridge Foundry. And she mentioned a very similar experience of just this continual, 33-to-1 ratio of guys to girls. But so what are some of the steps you take on a day-to-day basis that, when you're running the Tech Girls movement that help you fulfill your mission?
What an excellent question. You're a great interviewer. Thank you. At the moment we are running the competition. So it's a 12-week program. We've extended it 4 extra weeks because we had so many girls who wanted to enter a little bit late. So we have nearly 500 girls across Australia now competing in this national competition. This is only our 3rd year. We had 18 in the first year, 132 last year. Now we've grown to 500 girls this year. So we have girls in teams who are working through the program, and I match each of them with a mentor. So the mentor from industry literally meets the team 1 hour per week online. So they can be from anywhere in the world, essentially, as long as they're on the similar time zone, and they actually meet with their team each week. So I myself am mentoring 10 teams. So we have, I think, 130 teams this year. I've got 10 across 2 schools. So I go into the classroom and actually spend time with the girls, going around and answering questions, helping them refine their problem. I mean, even just defining the problem is a really difficult thing to do. And that's why I have a little issue with I don't mind the idea of teaching everyone to code, but I think it's really important to teach them that we need to have a good problem, that we want an important problem to solve first. And I hate seeing technology built for technology's sake and a solution looking for a problem. That's not the way we should be building technology and using our efforts. So really it's about educating young people, find the problems in the world that you want to solve, and then let's find a practical way of actually solving them. So I spend a lot of time talking with mentors and teachers, presenting at education conferences and things to really spread the word about practical things we can do in the classroom. And I just did a blog post last week on how to beat stereotype threat in the classroom. And part of that is actually about rewriting some of our technology history with the women that we talked about before. And they're just a very start of what we're talking about with women in history around STEM. But I think building that into the curriculum and getting people talking more about that as a conversation. And it shocks me how many people I speak to constantly who've never heard of Ada Lovelace, like the first programmer in the world. Yet everyone talks about programming and coding and this kind of stuff. So I think that's really sad. So it's about educating people on a daily basis. I spend a lot of time on social media trying to get the good word out about, for instance, we have a crossword of women in STEM history. So we invite people to come and do the crossword and see how much they know. And it's amazing when people realize they actually know very little about such an important part of the world that we live in today.
I want to talk more about your day-to-day work, which is you have a company called Adroit Research, which you founded to train people in improved qualitative research software and methods. Could you explain what that term qualitative research means?
So qualitative research relates to unstructured data. So in the world we live in now with so much big data, essentially, something like I think 85% of the data that's out there is actually unstructured. So how do we make sense of all of that kind of data? So for instance, I work a lot with researchers. I teach a very specific software package for research, which allows people to manage that kind of unstructured data. So, for instance, I have working on a project where we've been analyzing tweets at a conference over 3 days, where we have something like 18,000 tweets. Now, what do you actually do with that other than numbers? We want to make some sense and the meaning behind what's actually going on. So I guess qualitative is in opposition to quantitative, which is where we talk about numbers and counting things. And that's a very useful method to understand the world. But it only is half of the picture. So qualitative is really where we ask the why and the how type questions to say, okay, well, these are the numbers of how many technical people we have in the industry, for instance, men and women. So why is that happening? So qualitative techniques allow us to ask those underlying questions. And for me, I'm a researcher. So I've been a researcher for a really, really long time. And a lot of my research has been focused on interventions for girls around technology and trying to understand what are the trigger points. So, for instance, we run an event in Victoria called Go Girl, Go for IT, which is every 2 years we get 1,500 girls on campus at the university at Deakin, and we give them a really great day, exposing them to all awesome things about technology, and then we evaluate that event. And so we've been evaluating that over the last 10 years. We had something like 10,000 surveys from the girls, and we've been trying to look for some patterns around. We have this group of girls who are interested. What can we do with them to really maximize our opportunity? Because half the battle is getting them interested. The fact that when we get them onto campus, we've found 80% of them are actually interested by the end of the day. So how can we maximize our efforts and really engage them on a longer term basis? And that's where the book comes in. So they get to take the book home, talk to their parents. We need their parents' buy-in, talk to their teachers, share it with their friends. We need support from all around, and then they can join the competition, and then they can go to a coding day and really keep the momentum going. I think it's absolutely key.
So talking about this qualitative research approach, so for example, let's say you're looking at tweets or you're looking at survey data. So in some sense, these types of data, they are unstructured, like you said, but in another sense, it seems like you can impose structure on them. Like a tweet has up to 140 characters. It consists of alphanumeric characters. There's mentions. So there is some structure on it. So what does that? What do you when you're performing qualitative research, when you're working with a client or a set of researchers, by qualitative research, are you taking things that feel qualitative and attaching quantitative notions to them? Or give me a better idea of how that research progresses.
That's a really good question that you ask, and I guess in some way you are putting structures, but I guess it's more around themes and understanding rather than metrics and numbers. So usually we apply those numbers to bigger data sets, whereas usually with qualitative data we deal with smaller data sets. So it might be we go and interview 30 people in a particular situation to get some insight into what's happening within that situation, and so that's when we really get to delve deep and ask more detailed questions beyond the what and the what and the when, and to say, well, what's the how and the why as to how all that's coming together. So, for instance, I think tweets is probably maybe not the best example in this instance because it is big data usually, and we do look at it quite quantitatively. But what we do with, say, big data like that is we do look at it quantitatively first because we count what seems to be important and what patterns are there. Once we see those big patterns, then we start to delve in and do some qualitative analysis to understand the underlying meaning behind it. So, for instance, I have a client who's looking at tweets about how do people tweet about God, for instance, for his PhD. And he's looking at different times of the year, for instance, Christmas and Easter, but actually looking from different countries. How are people using different terms and what is the meaning behind that? So it goes beyond the numbers. it allows you not only to count, but to think about what counts and to get a bit more understanding of the underlying meanings behind things and people's opinions and perceptions and points of view.
Okay, I understand. So when we're talking about your background, you got a PhD in information systems and a bachelor's in information technology. You could have followed any number of paths. Your career sort of wound in this interesting direction, and you ended up with a career that you're really happy with. And I think there are a lot of listeners who maybe they're in a technology job and maybe they're not entirely happy with it, but they're not sure which direction to go in. They're not sure what they should focus on. And I mean, maybe this gets into like the discussion of entrepreneurship or something, but how did you navigate that, the potential space of futures that, you were faced with when you got your PhD, you were done with the last mile of graduate school that you could have gone down. How have you assessed this question of what you should do with your life?
What a profound start to the day. So it's early morning here in Australia. And you're absolutely right that I think I ask that question every day, to be honest. I'm not sure I've worked out what I want to do in life yet. But at the moment, I really do enjoy what I do. And you're right, I have made some somewhat non-traditional choices. Going to university studying IT in itself was not traditional, not expected. I'm the first person in my family to actually finish university, so was not expected to go down that path at all. Then I did an honours degree. I went to work for a while and decided to do a PhD, and I realised I was doing a lot of research and realized if I actually wanted to run my own research teams, I had to do a PhD. So I was really practical about it. And I chose to do it at a time when I had a really great topic. I had great supervisors and I had some funding support to actually get me through that. So I didn't jump in straight after my undergraduate. I left some time to really work out what I wanted to do. And by no means did I take an easy path with my PhD. I studied illegal file sharing communities in Australia. And so this is something that is very taboo, very difficult to get through our ethics in the university, and just difficult to do the research in general. But I knew that if I was going to do a PhD, I didn't want to just tick a box. I wanted to
So illegal file sharing is around the time when you were in school. Was that like Kazaa and Napster, or what are we talking about here?
So we're talking, say, 8-9 years ago. So actually probably 10 years ago I started. And yes, those technologies were around, but I was looking at more of the secret underground communities where there's actually a whole lot more going on. It's much more sophisticated. And for me, being a systems person, they were really interesting systems. So they were very organized, lots and lots of rules to participate, yet it was all completely illegal. So for me, this was quite an appealing place to go and spend some time as a researcher and observe and try to document, because it was a particular type of community that sits underneath all the other communities that we tend to know about. Like, most people don't know these communities exist. So for me to be able to not expose them, but to be able to learn from them, because I found they were very, very sophisticated, and I'm sure many of your listeners probably know the types of communities that I'm talking about. They're not so available anymore because the types of technologies have changed, but certainly at the time it was something. The community I studied had, I think it was about 1,300 people, and I got access to one that had 10,000 people and that kind of thing. So we're talking not insignificant numbers. So, and to be honest, I actually found it quite difficult to publish that research after I finished my PhD, because again, it was something that it was very, very specific. And I found particularly in the US, it was sort of, well, you're talking about illegal behavior, so we're not that interested. Whereas I went to Europe and they're like, wow, this is cutting edge stuff. We want to know more, and winning awards and things. So I guess I didn't make things easy. And I guess what that taught me is I didn't really want to be a full-time academic, just because I found I was quite limited. I felt like my wings had been cut a little bit being in that academic space, and I felt I now had the qualifications to go out and share that knowledge with others. So building up my expertise in methodology as a qualitative researcher as well through that time, I decided to set up my own business. And actually, I am a researcher still. I still have research teams and I deal with researchers every single day, but I get to choose on what level I want to do that. But I get to actually advise them in ways that I get access to so many more researchers than I ever would as an academic, just because I find them in a time of need and when I can help them, and I feel like I do much more good than if I was being a full-time academic. So I think for me, I did really struggle for quite some time. Can I be somewhat of an academic and also an entrepreneur? And I think I've finally found a way that I can do both. And I want to share with everyone out there listening that, yes, you can do both and be respected in both areas. And it is a lot of hard work, but we all work hard all the time. It's about the types of choices that you make. So I'm quite specific in the research projects that I still work on and where I try to publish, and I work with interesting people. For me, that's one of the most important things. But then also putting that research into practice. So I find they inform each other very well. The research that I've been doing around girls in technology and women in tech, that definitely feeds into what I'm doing in the tech girls movement. So for me, it's sort of the tech girls movement's in the middle and everything feeds into that. And I get to help researchers every day, which I absolutely love.
So you researched this gray market downloading environment. It sounds like something out of a chapter of Freakonomics. And and you parlayed the knowledge of that unique activity into your own entrepreneurial venture. And I find it quite interesting because I'm trying to think of what is the generalizable lesson there? Is the generalizable lesson that people should just focus on what they find interesting and pray that it works out, or that they should constantly be looking for a way to leverage their passions into something that they enjoy full-time as an entrepreneurial venture? Like, what is the solution here? Because, I think that like we're obviously moving towards this economy where people have the opportunity to be increasingly entrepreneurial. And certainly for people who are technologists, it is increasingly unpalatable to work for a large bureaucratic organization. So what's the generalizable lesson here from your experience?
Awesome question. I think leverage, as you mentioned, is really important, and thinking about what are your core skills and what are you good at. And it's probably only now that I've realized I'm really good at talking and connecting people and sort of filling in the gaps. And so whatever that environment lends itself to, I'm not quite sure, but I guess what I'm doing now is building community. And it's interesting because you're talking about my PhD, which was looking at communities, and now I'm building a community with the Tech Girls movement. And I think there's a lot of similarities that cross over there as well. And I guess I didn't go out and just pray that it would all work. I have to be a bit more practical than that. Like everyone, we have to pay the rent, we have to get by, and I still want to go on holidays and do those kinds of things. So for quite a number of years, I was teaching one day a week at university, and that would at least supplement paying my bills. So then whatever else I did in the week, if I didn't make any money out of my own company, well, at least I had that to fall back on, and that would get me through. So of course I have a supportive partner as well. But I think being really practical and having that regular income and then finding ways to spend your other time. But for me, it's all about partnerships and networking and meeting as many people and being open to opportunities. And I think if you're open to opportunities, people will come and they'll see that. And I guess a bit of philosophy in that, but how does the universe reward us? But I think it's about, if you put good stuff out there, good stuff will come back to you.
So what advice do you have specifically for women in technology who are trying to figure out how to be more entrepreneurial?
I think find people that you can look up to and get advice from. I mean, we talk about mentoring, whatever you decide to call it. I mean, it could just be an informal chat with other women and men as well. But learning as much as you can, never thinking that you're ever the smartest person in the room, or never being that person, because there's always new things to learn. And I think really trusting in your own gut instincts as well. Now, I question mine very regularly, but I think being a researcher, I'm always coming back to believe in the method. So if you put all of the right structures and things in place, and they call this serendipity essentially, but what serendipity means is if you put all of the right systems, processes, structures in place for things to happen, they will actually happen. So it's not like it just suddenly comes out of nowhere. It's because you've been working really hard in a concerted effort towards something. So I think follow your passion, absolutely, because if we're working and not enjoying it, then I don't see what the point of that is. I'd rather probably be unemployed, I think. But giving back to community, I think, is really key. And going to community and actually seeing how you can contribute is a really powerful way to build your own confidence and self-esteem. And again, it all comes back to confidence and self-esteem. So believe in yourself. Talk to as many people as possible, leverage those networks that are out there. There's some fabulous networks, particularly online now. We don't have to be in any particular place. Like for me, Twitter is an amazing community of people where I've met I sometimes meet people 2 years after we've been tweeting, and then we hug and we spend days together like we've known each other for a really long time, because that's the power of online networks, I think. So I think leverage them as much as possible, and be active. Don't be reactive. Be proactive.
Yeah, the proactivity thing, that's a good piece of advice. And I find the community aspect, building a community, can be very confidence boosting. I've certainly found that in the podcast. I didn't expect to be building a community, but it's been very interesting, because as I've done these shows, people start to listen, they subscribe, or they join the Slack channel, and they send me an email, and they're like, "Hey, this really resonates with me," and it kind of emboldens me, and it makes me a little more confident in my own depiction of or my own impression of how I see the world, because other people give me feedback and they're like, "Hey, you said this thing and it makes a lot of sense to me." And so I think that's why, what you say about building community is so crucial, because it's, building a community, you help yourself for the reasons that I just exclaimed and what you had said before that, but you obviously help the other people that are in the community, and they're all going to be networking with each other. So like, building a community is like probably a really, really good place to start for anybody thinking entrepreneurially. Absolutely.
Or even engaging in a community that's already out there as a starting point. And to be honest, it's not something I ever really thought that I would be doing. But what I'm getting now is I'm getting mentors coming to me and saying they spent an hour with their team at school, and it's one of the best hours they've had in their life. And for me, this just blows my mind. I mean, I know it's going to be a powerful experience for everyone involved, but I had no idea of the actual impact on that level that it would have. And I feel just so proud that I've created an opportunity for that to happen, and for young girls to have their own opportunities and choices. And certainly I didn't expect a lot of the things that have happened to me. I mean, I met a Grand Duchess last year. I'm hosting Baroness Susan Greenfield on Monday at an event here in Brisbane, who's a neuroscientist, world-leading expert in how digital technologies are changing our brains. And she accepted an invitation because she's a real-life superhero, and I just kind of pitched it to her. So, I mean, that kind of stuff. I have 50 young girls coming along to hear her and her research. So for me, bringing those people together and making those connections, I just couldn't be prouder, and it's the best reward of all.
So I want to get to draw to a close and ask you, like, how are things progressing? Have you seen any statistics or studies that display how the involvement of women in technology is changing? Is it improving, or is it getting worse, or how is it changing?
I think it's pretty stagnant, and it's been that way for quite some time. So, I mean, even for, say, the last 20 years, the figure of the representation of women in the tech industry pretty much around the world is around 20% on average. Some countries better than others, some worse. You look at countries like Germany and the Netherlands, where you think the figures would be much higher. They're around 8%. So it's not as obvious as it seems. There are certainly pockets of good things happening. I know in the US there's some really awesome things happening around, say, Harvey Mudd College, with Maria Clara over there, and Carnegie Mellon in the past, and those kinds of initiatives. So having really, really big impact, but it's not widespread, unfortunately. And whether or not it translates to women being in the industry, well, hopefully. So really the only way I see the industry is going to change is if we get a critical mass of, say, 30% women at a minimum. Once you get that critical mass, then there's enough people to actually instill change on a wider level. So there's a joke that people say that we will have true equality in the tech industry when we have as many mediocre women as we have mediocre men. Now, I don't mean to offend anyone with that, but what it says is that most women who are in the tech industry at the moment are actually quite exceptional. They've fought to be there. They're feeling quite confident in their abilities, and not everyone has that. So we need to get more into that situation so we can start to have real change. So sadly, I don't know that we've had a lot of change in the last few years. I know after the figures came out of Silicon Valley about a year and a half ago, when out of Twitter and Google and Facebook and so on, about how many women and minorities in their tech industry. I know that a lot of those companies are really trying to do things now and got diversity strategies in place, but I guess it will take a few years before they start to show. But even still, I have women saying they're the only person in their development team, they're the only woman, in the development team, and that's not a nice place to be. So I haven't seen big impact yet, but I'm hoping the fact that we're using technology every day, it's underlying everything we do, we have to make it part, and making young people know the difference between not just using tech but building tech, and that's where we need to be. So, and knowing that everyone has a role to play, and we need all kinds of people. So I think education, we need to keep doing that. We need to give women in general more confidence and teach everyone about unconscious bias so that we can start to make real change. And I'm sad I can't really report on much change at the moment, but I hope if we do this again in a couple of years' time, we've got more to report.
Yeah, hopefully. We had Google, somebody from Google on the show recently, and they cited a statistic where in the 1980s, it was something like 38% of STEM and computer science graduates were women, and more recently it's like 18% or 16% or something that's like half, and it's like pretty scary if it's actually getting worse rather than getting better. So to conclude, how can someone who is listening to this podcast contribute to this movement? I think most of the listeners are white males. So how can a random white male or generally anybody, how can anybody listening to this podcast contribute to the movement that we need to attain, where we have more women involved in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent question. And I think, well, firstly, if you want to get involved directly with the Tech Girls movement, we're always looking for funding to keep our programs going. You can buy some books, send to all of your young female relatives and things like that. So techgirlsmovement.org. Or I think in general, it's about if you've got a female colleague who possibly is in the minority in the workplace, inviting her to a gathering, it might be, or encouraging her to participate in a meeting, or pointing to her in a meeting to actually share her point of view, and getting her to lean in, if we're going to use that kind of term. I think it's about even young people. So asking young girls particularly, what is their favorite book? What kind of change do they want to see in the world? We often conflate women particularly with what they look like and their appearance, and whereas men, it's often more about qualifications and expertise. So I think just being a bit more aware of the unconscious bias, and even from a very young age, I have a 2-year-old of a friend of mine, and she says, I can't be a builder like daddy because I'm a girl. So, I mean, I don't know where she's getting these messages from at 2 years old, but they're getting there. So I think trying to be aware that this is happening and counteract it, and give lots of positive role models, and talk about women in history and science and tech and the awesome stuff that they do, and just be a bit more aware yourself about the impact that you have on other people's lives, and how you can really, one little thing each day can make a big difference.
Okay, Jenine. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for all the great work that you do. It's been great having you on for an interview.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been an awesome interview. I appreciate it.